Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Donna Steinfeld, Associate Director Advising Services at ISSS. I am joined by one of our advisors, Madison McHale. We are going to go through the OPT presentation. A lot of this will be geared towards post-completion OPT, but there are slides that will give you a overview of as well of pre-completion. So some of the steps are very similar, but the main focus will be post-completion OPT. And for those of you who are graduating this spring, this is going to be very relevant. And if you're not graduating this spring, but in a future term, it's great to prepare, plan ahead. And just so you know, either this recording or a future or past recording will be posted on our website, and we ask that you refrain from questions until the end. You'll be able to put them in the chat, and or if you put them early, we will address them all at the end of the presentation because a lot will be covered as we go along, and you'll realize that you know that a lot of these questions will be answered during that process. So I will let Madison go ahead and take over for the next slide.
All right. Hello, everyone. Okay, so we're going to start with OPT basics. So the purpose of OPT is to apply knowledge gained in the classroom to practical work experience. And there are two types of OPT. There's pre-completion and post-completion. More often than not, I mean, especially students that are here that are going to be graduating, you're going to be looking at post-completion OPT. And that is a postgraduate benefit of the F1 visa. It's post-completion OPT, the duration is 12 months per degree level, and OPT is authorized by USCIS, not ISSS, so it is not an internal process in terms of approving you for OPT. It's gonna let me. Okay. So eligibility, you must be currently in valid F1 visa status and that you have completed a minimum of at least one academic year in lawful status and in full-time status. And also to apply for OPT, in order to apply, a job offer is not needed. I know it's a question that I do get a lot recently, but yeah, you will not be asked for any like job employment information when applying for OPT. So types of employment. So for OPT, employment can be paid or unpaid. And if it's unpaid, it would be, volunteering or legitimate unpaid work is permitted. That does not violate labor laws. Students can hold up to multiple positions. Changing employers is also allowed. Whether you have one position or more than one position, each week your total work hours need to be at least a minimum of 20 hours per week or more. And that is cumulative if you have more than one position. It's not like on post-completion where each position has to be for at least 20 hours or more. As long as at the end of the week you're hitting that 20 hours cumulatively, then that is acceptable. Just a heads up to Donna and Mike, for some reason, it's not letting me change the slides. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so in terms of one of the other, eligibility for OPT in terms of jobs is working in your field of study. So the employment must be directly related. So a common question is, how do I know if a job is related to my field of study? You can look at duties versus the type of company, compare it to your academic curriculum. Can you justify the relationship? If you were ever asked, in 1 to 2 sentences, how is what you're doing in this position directly related to your field of study? And it could be, say, in such and such job, I'm doing A, B, and C, and that is related for the following reasons. I mean, as long as there's kind of like a clear connection between the two. That is what is being looked for when working in your field of study. In terms of resources for that, if you are having hard time kind of figuring out whether, job options that are in your field of study, or, how to better justify that relationship, we do recommend, either connecting with your academic department, your academic advisor, maybe even alumni, as well as career services. We have 2 links there for resources. But that's usually what we do recommend, because as ISSS, we cannot assist with that portion academically. And also your departments know your program best. So that is what we do recommend. Okay, so the next few slides, we're going to go over the OPT application process. So we go to the next slide. Thanks. Okay. So we're going to talk about each of these in detail, but this is kind of just the general overview of the process. So it is a multi-step process, and that continues even beyond adjudication, or when a decision is made on the OPT application itself. So first step is requesting OPT in terms of, or actually, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're just going to show the general timeline, and then I'll go into detail. So as you can see here, from start to finish, it's you as a student recommending things, and then to the very end, the last step is, beyond when your OPT has been approved, in terms of what obligations are required of you with reporting, and we'll go into that as well. Okay. So post-completion OPT filing timeline for spring graduates. So as many of you may already know, and who I've advised so far personally, the earliest OPT application date is going to be 90 days before your program end date. So for May 20th graduates, that's going to be February 20th is when that period began. And then the latest that you can apply for OPT is 60 at the end of your 60-day grace period, which specifically is July 19th. Okay, next slide. Okay. So as before, when I was getting ahead of myself, step 1 is requesting OPT. So first, you're going to want to read the OPT section on our website, and that is the link to that. It has really great information in terms of just the general overview of the process, as well as how to officially request OPT with us. And when we say request OPT, you're going to be requesting what's called an OPT I-20. So to complete that, you're going to do the OPT I-20 request e-form in iPen. You'll log into iPen to do it. It's also going to consist of your department essentially approving it as well. So in the e-form, it's going to ask you to put your academic contact information. So that is going to be the secondary approver. And then for post-completion OPT requests only, there is an OPT pen processing fee, as well as, in order to be able to finish and submit the e-form, within it, there is going to be an OPT tutorial that you're required to view. Next slide. Okay. So with requesting OPT, in that e-form, you are going to be asked to choose a requested OPT date. So, and this is something that you do need to decide on your own, but there is a range of time in which that the OPT start date needs to fall within. So the earliest start date that you can have is the day after your program end date. So for May 20th graduates, that's going to be May 21st. And then the latest is within your 60-day grace period. That would mean then the latest date that you can have, as we said before, the end of the 60-day grace period for May 20th is July 19th. That is the latest start date that you can have. So anywhere between May 21st and July 19th. Now, from there, in terms of the end date, how that is chosen, it's going to be up to 12 months from the start date. So as you can see in this example, it's not, USCIS doesn't do, for example, if you chose July 19th to the following July 19th, it would be July 19th to July 18th. And that should say 2025. Sorry about that. And then any approved pre-completion OPT time will be deducted. So if at some point while you were here at Penn, you had used pre-completion OPT, if you had used full-time OPT pre-completion, so for example, if you did a month of full-time pre-completion OPT, then 1 month would be deducted from your post-completion, the 12-month total. But if you did pre-completion OPT part-time, let's say for 2 months of part-time pre-completion OPT, then only 1 month of that would count towards taking away from your total post-completion duration. Then the initial OPT request, though, please be aware, it does not include STEM extension OPT. As I know that's a question that we get a lot in terms of people asking, you know, if they are STEM eligible, why can't they just request the 3 years altogether? So post-completion OPT, that is up to 12 months of OPT, and then 90 days prior to that post-completion expiring, that is when if you're in a STEM eligible degree, you can then apply for that 24-month STEM extension. All right, next slide. Okay, so next step is DSO recommendations. So as I said before, that request form in IPEN, it's to request an OPT I-20. It is an OPT DSO recommended I-20. So essentially, at the end of us processing that e-form, when we issue you that I-20, that has our DSO recommendation for that USCIS is looking for when you're applying for OPT. E-form processing time is 3 to 5 business days, and we do say 5 to 7 in peak time. I'm going to clarify, though, that is when the form is pending with ISSS. When you first submit the form in IPEN, it first gets automatically routed to your department for them to approve their end. And you'll get automated emails from our system letting you know kind of where it's gone. Once they approve their portion of the form and you get the automated email saying, you know, your department has approved their portion, your request is now back with ISSS for processing, that is when that 3 to 5 business day clock starts. So if you are going into IPEN, you're noticing after a couple days, a few days, that your academic department still has not approved their portion, that's when we recommend, you know, you reach out to them, make sure they received the form. But that is to clarify when our processing time begins, is when it's back in our queue. And the result of it is we issue, as I said, a new I-20 with a recommendation for OPT. The I-20 will be emailed to you electronically, and you will need to print and sign the I-20. Even if we'll talk about in a second in terms of filing, there is an option to apply for OPT online, but you still need to print and sign the I-20. Okay, next slide. Okay. Next step is sending application to USCIS. So big thing to keep in mind, you must be in the US, physically present in the US at the time that you are filing the I-765. Even if it's online, I tell my students, USCIS will find out. They always do. So even if it's online, you still need to be physically present here at the time that you're hitting submit for it. We do have a really detailed instruction guide on our website, and that's what this link is directing you towards. Really detailed. It's both written and screenshot instructions of both how to set up your USCIS portal, and then as well as detailed instructions of filling out the application. So, and then in order to file, you must have received the OPT I-20 from ISSS. And then to file with USCIS, you must do that within no more than 30 days from when you receive the OPT I-20, or USCIS will deny your application. And the issue date on your I-20, I know some people do ask me this, on the first page of your I-20, where you see that an ISSS advisor has signed, right next to their signature is a date. That is your issue date of your I-20. So within 30 days of that date, you need to apply for OPT. And then I know we said before in terms of there's pen processing fees, USCIS itself does have an online filing fee. Right now it's $410. As of April 1, it is increasing to $470. And then if you want more information, that is the link to the USCIS website. They have a file online section. Next slide. So next step, USCIS adjudication. So processing timelines do vary with regular processing. It's right now, it's still kind of early for us to figure out kind of how spring is going in terms of processing times. But on average, throughout, it's typically 3 months on average, but it does fluctuate on either end. It could be sooner, it could be later. There's kind of no rhyme or reason to it, or really pattern. But on average, it can take 3 months. So that is for regular processing. If you do decide that you would like to look into premium processing, it is an additional fee of $1,685. And what premium processing does is that within 30 days, USCIS needs to give you some sort of decision or adjudicate your application. And right now that is 30 calendar days, but effective April 1, that's also another change. USCIS is changing it from calendar days to business days. And also you can add premium processing on after the fact. Especially if you are unsure if you want to add it, but you don't want to delay submission any further. As long as your application is pending, still listed as pending, you can go in and add it on after the fact. And then from that date that you've added it on, then that is when that 30-day clock would start. When you've submitted, you will receive a case number from USCIS via electronic notification through your online portal. It's usually a receipt notice that's automatically uploaded to your account as a PDF. And that is what you will use to check the status of your application. If you go to uscis.gov, there is a tab that says check your case status, and that's when you put that case number, and that's when your latest update will pop up. Big reminder that you may not engage, start employment, or even training for that employment during this time. USCIS also may send you a request for evidence during the adjudication period. That is an option. That essentially means that the officer, or whoever at the time is reviewing your materials, they decide that they would like to see additional information from you before they make a final decision. Next slide. Thank you. All right, so then the final step, if all goes well, they process your application, it's been approved, is receiving the EAD card in the mail. Now, and it says here, contact us if you see any issue regarding your EAD or errors on the issued card. We do recommend that when you get the card that you're reviewing it, making sure, off the bat, you're seeing that, your name is spelled right, country of birth is correct, your date of birth, the dates that you requested. As soon as you receive your card in the mail, you're going to want to log into iPen and complete the e-form that's called OPT reporting. And you'll actually get a reminder of this when you are first emailed your OPT I-20. Because we need to, that's our way of essentially ISSS knowing that you received your card. So it's going to ask you to upload a front and back scan of the card. And then we also review the card as well, just to see if there are any issues or anything like that. But that's how we know that it's been approved and that process is complete. So I'm going to hand it over to Donna.
Thank you, Madison.
You're welcome.
Um, so we are going to go into of some common topics that come up during OPT. So one question is, when can I start to work? It's very important that once you have the employment authorization, you want to make sure that you have that card in hand after it's approved by USCIS and as of the start date on the EAD. So you want to make sure you've reached that effective start date with and have the EAD before beginning any employment. Okay. It's very important while you're on OPT that you're doing reporting through IPEN. Um, for example, when you first get your EAD, when you have a job to report, any changes in that employment, changes in your address, it's all done through the e-form. So for example, and must be done within 10 days of any change happening. So when you do the OPT reporting e-form, you'll use that for the OPT employment. If your status change or you leave the US, you'll also report it through that e-form. There also is an address, email, phone e-form where you can report any change in your legal name or address. And what's very important is even just to submit the EAD, even if you don't have a job, we can make sure everything is updated properly in your CVIS record. And it's very important as well that you have this employment recorded in CVIS. So if it's ever asked for in future immigration applications, such as an H-1B, they're going to want to see your history that you had employment recorded and that you did not accumulate unemployment time, which we'll also go over. Now, it's also the SEVP portal is another way for you to see your information. When your OPT is approved, you will get an email to set up that portal from them. It may go into your junk mail, so you may want to, keep an eye out. It's actually not spam. And it's another way for you to see and view your CVIS information. Um, we also have a portal reset e-form and IPEN, but ultimately, the most important thing is to make sure you're continuing to report in IPEN. The portal, SEVP portal it's not a mandatory resource, but it is another way to see your information. But IPEN is going to be where you want to make sure you continue to do any updates. So I mentioned unemployment time. So it's important to note that while you're on your post-completion OPT, you can't accrue more than 90 days of unemployment. So this is something that over those 12 months that you're not accruing an aggregate of 90 days. So if you take, let's say, 30 days before you start your first job and then 30 days in between job 1 and 2, you're only going to have 30 days remaining. So you just want to keep track of that and see, and that's why it's also very important to do your OPT reporting so that clock isn't counting. And it is something that it's from the start of the EAD. So a common question that we do get is, I graduated on May 20th. Does my unemployment time start on May 21st? If your EAD does not begin until July 1st, for example, that's when that time will start. It's going to start as of the start date on the EAD. So if your EAD starts May 21st, that is going to be, that's when it would start. But if you use July 19th as your start date, that's when the time will start counting. Now, it isn't something that's really in function now, but if there is an alert that you haven't reported your employment time, it is possible that CVIS could implement at some point a termination of records if people exceed the 90-day limit. So it is a functionality they talk about here and there and could implement if they decide to. So again, why it's very important to make sure you're letting us know and doing the IPEN to report the start of your first job, end of that job, and any additional employment after that, to make sure that everything stays up to date. So travel, this is a very common question. So I want to make sure everyone's listening because it's probably the most common question we get in the chat and the Q&A section. So hopefully this will clear up most questions. So in certain cases, we don't recommend travel or it's not advised. But if you're traveling and it's before the end of your program, so for example, you're graduating this spring, so before May 20th, once you've applied and you know USCIS has your application, you can travel as you normally would. So you would use your normal F1 documents. If you have a valid F1 visa, you will have the signed I-20 that will give you when you request OPT. You have a valid passport. So your normal travel documents that you would do today or you did a week ago when you went on spring break, that's how you would travel before you graduate. However, after the program end date, it's not as much recommended. And let me just clarify, it's not recommended and there's risk, but it's not that it's prohibited. So the possible risks you may encounter where you travel is one, you definitely want to make sure if you're going to need to renew your F1 visa, not having the EAD will be problematic for that. So you definitely want to avoid travel in that scenario. If your EAD is lost in the mail, you're not going to be here to try and track it down. So many times we do hear about the EAD being delivered to an apartment building, to a main in a mailbox, and in some of the Philadelphia apartments and apartment buildings, we do see it get lost. And if you're here, you can more easily work with the post office, talk to your neighbors, see where it may have gone, and try and like track it down. It's much harder if you're not in the US and physically on site to do that. Um, you want to make sure you're looking at the portal for any requests for evidence and being able to respond to that. If you're overseas and you're not able to do that, that could be problematic. But I would say actually going to the point above that, the probably the biggest risk would be if something happens where it's after graduation and your OPT application, it could be denied or rejected for some reason. If that happens, and you're not here, there's no longer a grace period. So you may not have another chance to apply for the OPT because you're not here and you lost that tether to your F1 status. So once you depart and that happens, you're no longer going to be able to come back. Whereas if you're here and it's your grace period, so if you hopefully would get the denial or the rejection and you're still in the US and it's still before July 19th, you can apply again because you're still in the window. So that's probably the biggest possible risk and why travel is not recommended, as well as sometimes officers can scrutinize if you don't have the approval or you don't have the EAD. Um, the guidance does say you can travel while it's pending, but ideally you'll have your job offer, but it's not required, but you would have that EAD when you are coming back and ultimately it is something that you need to decide what's important and what's going to work for you. It's also why it's good for you to start doing the application much sooner than later, and hopefully you'll have some result before you do have to go, and that way it's a little bit more peace of mind. Okay, so after OPT is approved, you also want to make sure that you are talking with your employer. So if you have an employer who may be looking to do an H-1B application for you, you want to make sure they're aware of your travel plans because that could impact how they file that application. So make sure to talk to them and let them know of any travel plans. And when you do travel, again, these are the documents that you want to make sure that you're having. And an important note is unlike right now, when you're a current student, your travel signature on page 2 of your I-20 doesn't should be no more than 12 months old when you come in. It does go to 6 months. Now, we are still your F1 sponsor through OPT, through STEM OPT. So this will be something that you will be able to ask for a travel signature from us. When you do your OPT reporting, you can click that you want a new I-20 and you'll have a fresh signature on that. So it's just important that you're keeping track of that when you do travel. Also, the EAD, you'll want to carry that, and proof of employment is recommended. It's basically the guidance says if you have any. So, but if you do have it, make sure you're bringing it with you. Okay. So some of you may be eligible for an OPT STEM extension. STEM is basically majors that are classified as having SIP codes, classification, instructional programs is the technical term in science, technology, engineering, and math degrees. So this would give you an option to be able to extend for an additional 24 months. We're just going to do a brief touch on STEM during this presentation, but just so you know, on our website, it's going to give you much more detail on the process itself. And here's just some fast facts. Again, being eligible, you must have a STEM major and your major must be associated with a STEM SIP code. The job that you're doing, you must be working in your STEM degree at the time you're doing the extension. You need to have an employer, and you'll be working with that employer to do a training plan called the Form I-983, which you are going to be submitting as part of your e-form request to ISSS. But the whole process is very similar to post-completion OPT in that you are starting by getting a recommendation for STEM OPT extension from ISSS and then applying with USCIS. Key things as well is you'll be applying within 90 days before your OPT expires, and you have to make sure that it's received by USCIS no later than the last day of OPT. Again, reporting is very important, even more so when you're on STEM. There's going to be specific validation reports that you'll be able to submit via IPEN for us to be able to validate your CVIS record. There is 6-month validation, so every 6 months, and at the 12 and 24-month mark, or if you end any employment, there are final evaluations. So there's certain things you're always going to want to make sure you're keeping updated while you're on the STEM OPT and continue to do the reporting. Okay, so we're just going to do a little brief overview of frequently asked questions. So my OPT I-20 is more than 30 days old. May I use it to apply for OPT? No. You want to make sure, it's very important that if you, for some reason, aren't able to apply right away, that you're reaching out to your ISS advisor. If you're not aware, you can find your ISS advisor on IPEN when you go onto your homepage for IPEN or even Path at Penn. Now, you want to make sure you're contacting them, letting them know you haven't yet applied for your OPT and your I-20 is now more than 30 days old from when they originally issued that recommendation. If you use an I-20 that is over the 30-day limit, they will deny your application. So it's very important that you are getting in touch with your advisor and getting a new OPT I-20. Do I need my EAD before beginning work? Yes. So you're going to be presenting the EAD and the start date should be current when you start work and you're going through that onboarding process with your employer. Can I change my OPT request dates? Now, once you apply with USCIS, no. But if you haven't applied yet, you want to work with your ISS advisor to discuss any change in dates. But it's good, definitely make sure you think about your dates before you submit it. But if you do have to change it and you have not yet applied for OPT with USCIS, reach out to your advisor about that. Can I cancel my OPT if I have not used it? If you, again, similar to the request dates, in that if you have not yet applied with USCIS, make sure you reach out to your advisor about canceling the recommendation. If you have applied with USCIS and it is not, and it's still pending, you can try and have the cancellation go through. Just so you know, none of the fees will be refundable. If it is approved, then you won't be able to cancel it. And if you decide not to use it, it is going to be OPT that is lost. So a question, I already used 12 months of OPT in one program. Will I be eligible for another 12 months in another program? So you get a new period of OPT at each higher degree level. So if you were doing if you did your bachelor's and you got OPT after your bachelor's, and now you're completing a master's, you will get another 12 months of OPT. Same with doing math. If you did a master's and now you're completing a PhD, again, you'll get another 12 months of OPT in that case. What is my immigration status while on OPT? You will continue to be F1. So you are going to be still in F1 status. You're still going to be under Penn sponsorship. The OPT is a benefit of the F1 status. Okay, so here's just some final thoughts, making sure to check out our website. Make sure you have everything organized, you're planning ahead, read our emails. And you hear that from us all the time, but it's very important not to miss any important information. When we send you the OPTI 20, make sure to read through that email. It has all your next steps. And just keep any copies of any documents you send, any applications. This is just a good rule of thumb that you're always keeping documents, anything that's official that you're doing, whether it's immigration or just in your personal life as well. And then just, reach out to us for any questions on that. And here's just information on our website and our social media. So this is good things to know if you need to look up more information, get in touch with us, subscribe to our newsletter. It's very useful for you to have events coming up and important reminders.
All right. It looks like the video is done. We can move on to answering these questions. We got a whole lot of questions. I think we can also repeat some of the questions that we answered during during the video, just so everyone's on the same page for some of these questions. I don't know how we want to order this, but I got a couple questions about the executive MBA programs at Wharton. So I do know for sure that for the global cohort, they are not eligible for OPT, because for OPT you need to be uh, you need to have completed full-time study for one consecutive academic year in the United States. And for global, there isn't enough time in the United States to qualify for OPT. I don't really know enough about the programs in San Francisco or Philadelphia. If they're not like full time and you'd be doing other, I mean, I guess, yeah, I'm pretty sure I don't really know a whole lot about these programs. So perhaps you can email your advisor and we can reach out to our Wharton liaison and our team and, clarify, specifics on the differences between the Philadelphia and San Francisco programs. My impression is that they do not allow for OPT. However, I'm more sure of that for the global cohort than the other two. So I think I got to your question, Andre. Jean, do you have a couple questions you want to address right now?
Yes. So about the executive MBA, like Sean mentioned, we will just confirm to make sure the other cohorts are, whether or not they're eligible, but like Sean mentioned, for global cohort, it is not eligible. They're not eligible for PT. So I see some questions from Danny regarding OPT dates. So typically for students who are still in the process of looking for a job or not expecting to be working shortly after graduation, you have the option to choose a later start date, but no later than July 19th. That is the very last day that your OPT must start. The challenge with picking July 19th as the start date is that, like Danny mentioned, what if I later find a job and they want me to start, for example, in June? If you have already submitted your OPT application to USCIS, unfortunately, that date cannot be changed. So you will have to let the employer know that you are not authorized to work until July 19th. And that is also if your EAD has been received in the mail. And I think Danny's other question mentioned about, can I change dates? So no, once you submit to USCIS, you cannot change the dates unless you want to completely withdraw that application and refile and pay the application fee again. But you cannot just simply update your dates with USCIS.
I just want to clarify, if you submit your USCIS application, withdraw it, and submit again, you would need to pay the USCIS fees. However, before you file the USCIS application and you just file the request for an I-20, and then you decide afterwards, after we issued your I-20, that you want to change the dates, you would not need to pay the ISSS fee again. That is only a one-time fee. So if you pay the $200, you don't need to worry about paying it again if you need to change your I-20, or if, God forbid, your OPT application is denied and you have to apply again, you won't have to pay the ISSS fee again. That is only a one-time fee.
And then also really quickly to that, if for anyone who's reapplying for OPT, you have to make sure that you are doing that within your grace period, because once your grace period ends, you're no longer able to apply for OPT. So if for whatever reason you absolutely want to withdraw your current application with USS, it's still pending, you can withdraw it, but make sure that you reapply. But definitely work with your ISSS advisor, but you need to make sure that you reapply or resubmit before the end of your grace period.
Yeah. So I see a question here, I can read it out. Is the process of updating OPT employment the same as the initial application of OPT? If I change my employment or initially apply OPT without a job offer and later get a job offer, do I repeat the initial process again or fill out the OPT reporting e-form? So let me just clarify a couple things. When you apply for OPT, like you're not in OPT yet, you're still a student or you're in your grace period, you don't need to submit any sort of job offer or evidence that you have a job. Once you are on OPT, you can report your employment, and you should report your employment, otherwise unemployment would accrue. And when you do that, you do not need to submit any job offer or evidence. If you're asked of this at any point of your immigration process, you can provide this, but this is not part of the OPT reporting requirements. So if you apply for OPT, you get your EAD card. If you get your OPT I-20, you're okay with the I-20, you don't want to change the dates, you apply for OPT on the USCIS website, you get an EAD card, you have OPT, you don't need to do that again until you want to extend for the STEM extension if you're eligible. At any time you change employment, there's nothing you need to change. There's no new OPT applications to do. You just report the change in the IPEN system. So I hope I answered that question. I see a question here with the mailing address. My impression is that, yeah, they can be different. I know some students will want because the mailing address you put in the I-765, the OPT application, is where your EAD card is going to be mailed to. So if you are at an address that has had problems with mail being delivered, or if, for example, you'll be traveling while your EAD card is pending, which we don't recommend doing after graduation, but if this is the case, you'll want a US address for it to go to. You can have it go to a friend's house or something like that, for your friend to ship to you or give you the card themselves. In that case, I would assume the address on Path at Penn and your USCIS mailing address would be different. So I believe the answer to that question is yes. Jean, you said, yeah. Is that correct?
Yes,
Cool,
yes.
awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. Are there any questions you want to tackle, Jean?
Do we finish the executive MBA ones? I think there are a couple are still here, or would there just need to be
Yeah.
marked?
So yeah, I see one asking if WEMBA students in general not eligible for OPT, or is WEMBA Global Cohort. I'm pretty sure WEMBA Global Cohort is not eligible for OPT. However, the others, I do not know, and we recommend clarifying that with your advisors, and we can check with our Wharton liaison to clarify that.
I can answer the next about traveling. So a question is, if I received approval for OPT, but have not received the actual card, am I able to travel or not recommended? If it's before graduation, then we say yes, you are able to travel as long as you are returning before May 20th to attend graduation and to finish your things that you need to do for your program. After graduation, we highly recommend that you travel with the actual EAD card, in addition to other required documents such as your passport, I-20 with a valid travel signature, etc. So you can travel after graduation once OPT is approved, but we highly recommend that you travel with an EAD card in your hand.
I see Andre asked a couple questions. I may have shelved the wrong question because you asked a couple before. You said OPT requires that you study in the U.S. for one consecutive academic year. Is a requirement of UPenn or USCIS? That is a requirement of USCIS. That is not a requirement of UPenn. If we were giving out OPT authorization to folks who have only been in the U.S. For like one semester, like not consecutively, then we're not allowed to legally recommend OPT. So that is a USCIS requirement. Let's see what else. Yeah, so if you withdraw, oh, go ahead, Jean.
Oh, no, that's okay. Go ahead.
I see a question here. If I withdraw my OPT application and want to refile, are there any time constraints? So once you withdraw, yeah, you can apply immediately. And in fact, we would recommend you apply as soon as possible, because you don't want to get too close to the end of your grace period. And the time that the OPT card will be pending past the date of validity beginning. So for example, the latest you can apply, the latest start date you can have for your OPT this year would be July 19th if you graduate May 20th. If you apply for OPT, July 1st, unless you apply premium processing, or even if you apply premium processing, you will not have your EAD card by July 19th. However, the EAD card that you'll be issued will probably start July 19th. And all that time that you've been in the US without the EAD card, but after July 19th, will be counted towards your unemployment. So in order to minimize unemployment days accrued in that case, definitely apply as soon as possible after withdrawing if you still want to utilize OPT.
I want to add to that if I can. So when you want to officially withdraw an OPT application with USCIS, please work with your ISSS advisor because your ISSS advisor will have to submit a request to USCIS with a note from you requesting the withdrawal of the application. You cannot just simply go to your USCIS account and there's a withdrawal button to click on it. And also the second step of withdrawing an application is that you have to wait till the USCIS issue an official withdrawal notice before we can re-recommend OPT in CVIS for you. So it will take some days, so please plan well if this is something that you need to do. So so I would recommend that if this is what you must do, then please reach out to your ISSS advisor as soon as possible to get this process started. Again, this is only for people who have already submitted their application to USCIS and for whatever reason would like to change the OPT dates. If you have not submitted your application to USCIS, then the ISSS advisor can update your dates in CVIS, and we can reissue you an OPT I-20.
I see a question about pre-completion OPT. It is generally the same process. You would request an I-20, and then you would use that I-20 to apply online, the form I-765. There is no ISSS fee for pre-completion OPT, and there are no reporting requirements. I don't believe we need the employer to provide anything, as long as you can attest that the employer is employing you in your field of study, and you don't need to provide us anything for that. I mean, that's more down the line if you're ever asked about it, like the same for OPT. But just so you're aware, you know, with pre-completion OPT, like if you wanted employment in the summer, make sure that you apply, you know, well in advance, because of the processing times, unless you can afford the premium processing fee, to make sure that you have your EAD card in time. Just as I can never remind folks enough, you cannot start working until you have your EAD card in your hand and you're on or past the date of validity, the start date of validity on your card.
Right. Another question about changing dates. Again, once you submit the application to USCIS for post-completion OPT or pre-completion OPT, dates cannot be changed.
Yeah.
This
This last one. Yeah. So yes, like I said, you cannot start working until you have your card and you are on or after the start date written on your card. I would assume if you submit your application on June 10th, but you request the start date of June 20th, well, one, you're not going to receive your card by June 20th, even if you file premium processing. And I would also assume that they would not change the start date on your card. They would keep the start date as June 20th, even if you receive it by sometime in July or August, or later if you don't file premium. And all that time between the start date of your card and the day that you receive your card will still be considered unemployment. So if you're applying June 10th, I would recommend, honestly, putting your start date towards July so you don't accrue that unemployment. And there's no way of avoiding accruing that unemployment, because if you work, then you'd actually be working unauthorized because you don't have your card, and that would make you ineligible for any further work authorization in the United States and potentially any immigration status in the United States. So we highly, highly recommend against doing that. But it's ultimately up to you when you want to put the date, the start date of your card.
I think the last two questions about changing dates, updating dates. So again, you can reach out to your ISSS advisor to change your OPT, requested OPT dates if you have not submitted the OPT application to USCIS. So that is before submitting. So that's yes. So when once ISSS advisor determines that yes, we can help you updating the dates, then we will recommend so we will recommend OPT in CVIS, and you will give us the new dates that you would like to have your OPT start and end, and then we will put that dates in CVIS and issue a new I-20, new OPT I-20 for you to submit to USCIS.